you know, places like
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think they would have been like, wow, you,
Wow. So great job.
yeah,
Great job, Joe.
yeah. You guys are amazing.
That's are
You're
amazing.
gonna go get a wiener. Go to the ball game. Yeah, it's not a very. I don't mind some American accents. I actually quite like the southern ones. They're kind of like the slow
draw. Yeah.
It's kind of pretty cool. Like the, you know,
But
Alabama.
what I never appreciated until I worked at an American company was that regardless of where they are, their accent on the telephone comes through super clearly.
Yeah.
So like just on like the regular phone, like they're really easy to understand and very clear. Whereas Australians mumble and they're like, I don't know what you said.
Yeah. You can definitely have some difficulties understanding Australians.
Yeah.
I worked at a call center when I first went to Australia for a couple of weeks or something. Maybe, I can't remember, 3 weeks. And the number of people Australians that referred to Surfers Paradise as Surface Paradise and spelt it out like surface. I'm like, what the?
Oh, yeah, but have you heard the latest scandal from Australia? So
No.
like we have the job seeker benefit.
Yeah.
But there's this scandal that the government has got it wrong by over 50%. So they have given out like $60 billion to essentially no one, or like permission for $60 billion extra than what actually is required.
Yeah.
And the reason that the ATO, the tax office, is putting down for this is because Australians are bad at filling out forms. And so when they're supposed to say, like, how many employees are you putting on this benefit, like there's a box for that, they wrote out the amount of money that they wanted to receive.
Oh, jeez.
And so like instead of saying like one employee, they wrote 1,500 for like the $1,500 they wanted.
Wouldn't you build that into the system? Like,
yeah, I would have thought so.
I mean,
but apparently not. So there are all of these forms that have come through that says I've got 15,000 employees, or like.
Yeah, but how many companies actually have 15,000 employees? And very small.
Like, very small. Only like the big players. They shouldn't qualify for JobKeeper.
Yeah, it's just Other countries, that's the biggest problem in Australia, though. That's not a big one. And what about Britain? Like the Dominic Cummings, it's just insane. Hey, shall I flip over to the share screen?
Yeah. So you flip over. I'll shut my stuff down. Everything's ready to go on my end.
At 8 o'clock, I'm just going to go to full screen, and then So.
All right. Cool. All right.
Share screen. You should be able to see it now.
Yeah, perfect. All good.
Cool. Okay, hello, welcome again back to my home here in New Zealand. I hope wherever you're watching that you're feeling well and that you're safe. This is webinar 28 of a series of webinars that I've been producing during the lockdown period. Here in New Zealand, we're back into level 2, which means some of the restrictions, well, a lot of the restrictions due to the virus have been lifted. Not sure exactly about your situation, but like I say, I hope that you're safe and well. If this is the first time you're watching one of these webinars, my name is Greg. I've been an English teacher for the last 15 years. Most of that time I spent in South Korea, but I've been back here in my homeland, New Zealand, for the last 2 years. During a lot of that time, I've been working for Grade. I've made a number of videos for Grade, and like I say, we've decided to make these webinars. So today's webinar is going to be on reading. So it's from the academic reading test, or the practice test on the Grade site. The reason for that is because any one of the academic reading sections would be the same as section 3 in the general training IELTS reading test. So this will be helpful for everyone who's preparing for their IELTS test. For those who are actually interested in the general training reading, that will be next Tuesday in this public webinar. So what I'm going to do is take you over to the Grade site. Like I say, this is a practice test. It's not an authentic one. And actually, in this case, it's been designed to help you develop your scanning skills. If you've watched any of these previous webinars on reading, I keep telling you how important it is to scan. That means to find information quickly. So this reading practice today, I'm going to give you a chance to really work on your scanning. And what will happen is you'll see me go through the test and I'll answer it as if I'm a test taker. At any stage, if you have any questions, please send them through via the Grade Facebook page. I have my phone next to me, and my friend at the other end will send through any of your questions. So I'm now going to take you over to the Grade site. Okay, here we are. So you'll see this, if you go to the Grade site, you'll land on this page, my dashboard. We can see all of the different functions, writing, reading, listening, speaking. So we're going to go to reading and we're going to click on tests. So like I said, today is the academic reading test. We're going to work on this one here. And this reading is on forests. Okay, just a general reminder, if you're taking the general training test or the academic reading test, it is 1 hour long, but this is something I've mentioned every time. During that 1 hour, you need to also write your answers on the answer sheet. That's different from the listening test, where in the listening test, you have an extra 10 minutes after you listen to write your answers on the answer sheet. So just remember, in the reading test, you need to complete everything, including filling out the answer sheet during that 1 hour. Don't be one of those students who doesn't realize that until the last 5 minutes. So we're going to go to start. Now, when you do use the Grade page, you can change the amount of space that each test, that the test and questions take up. So I like to really make the reading as big as possible. So you can see I've gone for about a 65-35 split with my screen. Now, we're just going to go through the questions sequentially. So there are 13 questions for this section. Now, this is quite a common question type, and it's which paragraph contains the following information. So, and this information is who is responsible for clearing the Amazon forest. So I always think it's good just to have a quick look at the types of questions. So we have which paragraph contains. We have 4 of those. Then we have another very common question type, which is true, false, not given. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of those. And then it looks like we have 3 multiple choice questions. So I would definitely start with the I would probably just do them in this order rather. So you can think about which one's going to give you the biggest overview. So I think in general, when you have which paragraph contains, that's always a good one to start with, because by doing that, you're going to get a good idea about the entire reading. So we already know that this reading is about forests. In this case, I'm not going to bother with skimming. If you wanted to do skimming, what I would suggest is just reading the first sentence of each paragraph. If you want to know how big this reading is, I'll scroll over the whole thing for you. So we can see we have paragraphs from A to L. So that is our first question. And what I would do here is I would look at the keywords in question 1. And to me, the keywords are responsible, clearing, and in particular, I would just try find Amazon rainforest. That's one of the easiest words. A proper noun, which is the name of something, is easy to find. So we can see here in paragraph A, we can already see Amazon. So I want to give you a chance to try scan for this answer at home. So I'm going to do it with you. So if you need a bit more time, just send me a message. Otherwise, I'll imagine that you're a little bit slower than me perhaps, and I'll try to find the answer myself. And when I find it, I'll share it with you. Okay, so like I say, if you look for instances of Amazon, that's probably the easiest way to answer question 1. So once you find the keyword, just read that whole sentence. So in May 2008, a helicopter flew over unexplored parts of the Amazon in Acre state in Brazil, near the country's border with Peru, sorry. So there's nothing there about clearing the Amazon forest. So then I just go to the next instance of Amazon, which is paragraph B. Now, when I see that, I also see deforestation. So to me, this kind of is a big hint that I must be very close. This is quite a short paragraph, so then I just kind of scan over the whole paragraph and I can see the word clearing, right? So then I read that sentence. Loggers and cattle farmers continue clearing the forest cover and moving further into the heart of the forest, etc. So who is responsible for clearing the Amazon rainforest? Well, then we know the answer is loggers and cattle farmers. So I'm satisfied that's the answer, and I'm just going to click on B. Then we go on to question 2. So again, just be very methodical when you take the IELTS reading test. Use the same process each time. So here, the reason why governments and non-government movements find it difficult to protect Indigenous tribes. Now, governments, I think that word might be used quite often, but perhaps Indigenous tribes might not be used very often in this reading. And also, when I think of Indigenous, a synonym for Indigenous might be native. I can't think of many other synonyms for tribes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try identify the keywords that I think I will be able to find easily. So always go back up to the top. And now that we're more familiar with paragraph A, we can kind of discount paragraph A. We're familiar with paragraph B, so it's not going to be in paragraph A or B. So then we just keep scanning over from C onwards. So just don't want to be silent for too long. In C or D, I found nothing about Indigenous tribes. Hopefully you had the same. So we'll go on to E. Now, again in E, I don't see anything about Indigenous tribes, but in F, there's one of the keywords. So again, I want to check that the answer is not in this sentence. For many Indigenous people, the forest is their lifeline. Whether the timber or the minerals buried beneath are sometimes a curse. But again, we're looking for the answer, the reason why governments and non-government movements find it difficult to protect Indigenous tribes. And so I look for the next occurrence of Indigenous, and in B, I can see here, Indigenous and also Indigenous tribes, and then fully protected or protected fully. So I just want to check to make sure this is the answer. And I read that sentence: to have the rights of such Indigenous tribes protected fully, in the case of the Amazon and Peru, they might first have to prove the existence of these tribes, right? So that's the reason why it's difficult, because they have to prove that the tribes exist, right? So there, I feel confident with G. Now, there we go. There's a scroll bar here. You just have to sort of click to bring it up. So it'll have all of the paragraph options. So you just have to find that scroll bar, and then I'm going to select G. Okay. See what happens is it automatically takes me to the next question, which is 3. Which country has been successful in giving land rights to tribal communities? Now, again, land and rights, quite common words. If you can spot those two words next to each other as that phrase, that's great. But again, I'd probably be looking for the word tribal, or maybe communities that might have a lower occurrence. So with the keywords, if you identify the words which have a lower occurrence or are less frequently used, often they're easier to find when you scan. But again, just to be methodical, we know that there is nothing in paragraph A about tribal communities, nor paragraph B. With paragraph C, this is something we've checked before, but I just want to show you how by doing these set of questions first, we become very familiar with the reading. So we know that there was nothing about tribal communities in C or D. The same goes for E. Now, when we came to F, it talked about Indigenous people. And so what I do with F is I have a quick look here to see if I can find anything about tribal communities. So I scan over paragraph F, and I can't see anything about tribal communities. I'm going to do the same thing with paragraph G. But again, also because we've already answered G before, it's highly unlikely that the same paragraph will be used twice as an answer. So then I go through to H, and right away I can see that key term, tribal communities. So I read that sentence beginning, in other cases, like in India, there has been some progress. Sorry, the sentence starts here. The Forest Rights Act is now facilitating the transfer of land rights to tribal communities. So which country has been successful? Well, India, right? So there we have our answer. So it's going to be paragraph H. So we'll find the scroll bar. Here we go. Okay, takes us down to question 4. Now, when we have a proper name, like a family name, Buyan, I hope I've pronounced that correctly, if there are any Buyans watching, I'm just going to look for Buyan family. And because I'm quite familiar with this now, I actually saw before Buyan was here. But again, it's highly unlikely that G or H are going to be the answers. So I scroll back up to the top. And as I'm scrolling, I come across Buyan here. Now, how the forest provides for the Buyan family. So let's read that sentence in paragraph D. Thousands of kilometers from Bisi, in the state of Orissa, nestled up against the Bay of Bengal, live Gangi Buyan and her husband, Sukra Buyan, with their young family. So it's not really telling us anything about how the forest provides for them. Because it's a short paragraph, might as well just read the next sentence to make sure. This is East India, the legendary spring of India's mineral wealth and a major source of materials for global industrial growth in the past. So nothing in D, but it's referring to Ganges and Sukra in the next paragraph. And this is where it pays just to find the keyword first. So we're familiar with Ganges and Sukra now. And the other keyword from question 4 was forest. So for about 5 months of the year, Ganges and Sukra feed their family from the less than half-acre plot of land they cultivate on the edge of the forest, right? So this tells us how the forest provides for Ganges and Sukra, and we get more information here as well. During this time, they also harvest vegetables, seeds, fruit, medicine, and building materials such as grass from the forest, right? So clearly that's the answer, and I can select E. So true, false, not given. Very common question type. Now, again, I'm always going to tell you the same things. Just repetition is so important when you're preparing for this test. One common mistake is that students often confuse not given and false. Just to make it really clear, if the answer is false, the information is given in the reading, but it is incorrect, right? So it's incorrect in the way the information is presented on the question, in the question. So if the answer is false, the information in the question and the information in the reading do not match, right? Now, not given is the hard one because this means the information presented in the question is not in the reading at all, right? So this is where you need to look at the topic of each paragraph. And because we have a better understanding of the reading, having done questions 1 to 4, hopefully we'll know where to look. So for example, tribal people, right? So we've already, tribal people who live in forests across the world are not in danger of losing their livelihoods. Now, to me, intuitively, this means like my natural instinct is that this is false. They're not in danger of losing their livelihoods. So it seems like this reading is all about forests and forgotten communities. It's all about tribal people losing their livelihoods. So again, we're going to look for tribal people. So just go through it methodically. In paragraph A, it does mention, no, it doesn't, well, it mentions huts, but I mean, intrigued people, we can see here that they might be tribal people, but it doesn't really tell us anything about them losing their livelihoods. But in paragraph B, okay, tribes. So the alarming rate of deforestation in the Amazon poses a very concrete threat to such remote tribes. So these remote tribes were the tribes which are mentioned in paragraph A. So there's a threat to remote tribes, right? And this threat is, it not only threatens their livelihoods, but their way of life, right? So clearly with the word livelihood being threatened, which we can see in question 5 here, this means it's false. So you have to read the questions really carefully. This is a negative statement. Tribal people who live in forests across the world are not in danger of losing their livelihoods. Well, the information is presented here in paragraph B that indeed tribes in the Amazon, for example, their livelihoods are threatened, right? So very tricky, that one. So just make sure you have to check that the statement is not negative. So this is a negative statement, which makes the answer false. Make sure I've got no questions. Okay, let's go to question 6. Okay, the logging of the Amazon rainforest has caused significant damage to the environment. So again, keyword here is Amazon. And because we're already familiar with this reading from having finished questions 1 to 4, we know that paragraph A, paragraph B talk about the Amazon. So what I'd be looking for here is logging, right? So, or anything related to logging, So I look through paragraph A. Now, when I scan that, I don't see anything related to logging, but as soon as I move down to paragraph B, I can see loggers, right? So loggers are obviously the people that do the logging, which means cutting down trees. Loggers and cattle farmers continue clearing the forest cover and moving further into the heart of the forest, inflicting often irreparable damage to the environment, as well as exposing remote tribes to diseases to which they have no immunity. Right, so it also talks about the impact loggers have on tribes, but before that, it talks about the damage done to the environment, and that is clearly true, right? So we go on to question 7. People who live in cities are extremely concerned about deforestation and tribal people losing their communities. Now, to me, the key word here is deforestation. Well, that's one which should be quite easy to find. Deforestation, if you're not sure, it means cutting down trees. So I'm just going to go right back to the top, and I'm very familiar now with paragraph A, and when I scan over that, there's nothing about deforestation. Now, paragraph B talks about deforestation, so we need to check people who live in cities. Now, let's see if we can find anything about people living in cities in paragraph B. I'll let you read that as well. Now, as you scan over paragraph B, there is nothing about people who live in cities, right? So the answer is definitely not given in paragraph B or A. So we carry on and we find Amazon. We're looking for deforestation rather. So let's see if we can find anything else about deforestation. So in C, nothing about deforestation. In D, I'll give you a chance. Nothing in deforestation, nothing about deforestation in paragraph D. Now, you may already be quite familiar with paragraph E. This was talking about Gunky and Sucre, and nothing about deforestation here. So perhaps you might have noticed in paragraph E, environmental degradation, not exactly the same, always the same meaning as deforestation. So F, no. Now, by this point, I'm thinking maybe the answer is not given, but it's worthwhile checking, because by checking, I'm going to get more familiar with this reading and overall. So yeah, there's nothing about deforestation in G. H, nothing about deforestation. Now, we do see the word forest, and it does say most of the losses of the forest. So deforestation means cutting down trees, so that is a loss of forest. So it's worthwhile checking this. So most of the losses in forests cover take place in developing countries and are largely caused by weak governance structures for forest conservation and management. But again, there's nothing here about people living in cities, right? So, okay, despite growth in forest cover, that's not deforestation. So K, nothing about deforestation. And finally, we're on to L, and there is nothing in L about deforestation. So I've definitely answered this question the hard way because I've gone through every paragraph to check. The only reason it's taken me longer to answer question 7 is because there was some paragraphs that I was not familiar with. Yes, this question took a long time to answer, but think about it this way. It's an investment in the rest of the questions, because when I answer questions 8 to 13, I'm now more familiar with the reading overall. It did take me a while to confirm that the answer is not given, but now hopefully I can answer questions 8 to 13 faster. So, okay, another one about deforestation. We should be experts on deforestation now for this reading. So deforestation is the effect of a global demand for raw materials that can be found in a forest. Now, sometimes you're going to be able to make a prediction. And if you know about deforestation, usually it's caused because people want things, whether it be beef, people cut down forests so they can graze cattle for beef, whether it's wood that's going to be used for furniture. So again, my instinct immediately is the answer is true, but let's check. And we'll go right back up to the top and just do it methodically. And we're just going to look for deforestation, or maybe we might see global demand or raw materials. So we know paragraph A, there was nothing about that. In B, it talks about deforestation. But again, there's nothing else in B about raw materials or global demand. So nothing in C about deforestation. And D and E, this was about Gangi and Sukra Buyan, so that does not talk about deforestation. But when I go to F, as I scroll up, hopefully you've seen it as well, but we see the whole phrase, global demand for raw materials, right? So now, this damage, and the damage means environmental degradation. So in this case, environmental degradation is deforestation. This demand is driven by global demand. This damage is driven by global demand for raw materials, right? So our prediction about this one being true is confirmed. If you were really in a rush, then you could have just probably guessed true, and the chances are that you would have been right. Some questions are easier than others. So in this case, question 8 is a much simpler question to answer than question 7, which required us to do a lot more reading, right? So let's go to question 9. Tribal people in developed and industrialized nations are most affected by deforestation. So why don't we go back to scanning for tribal people, because we know that deforestation is actually mentioned quite a lot, or another word that we might want to focus on is industrialized, right? So let's see if we can find the expression industrialized nation. Again, just go back up to the top because we don't want to miss anything. So we're going to be looking for industrialized. Now, when it says nations, this means countries. So when I see countries, well, Brazil is well, I think it's quite well developed, but you could argue that it's industrialized. So let's see what we can find. There's nothing about nations in B. In C, it starts talking about the Congo, right? So the Congo is a developing country. So you could argue that Brazil is an industrialized nation and Congo is a developed nation. But in both cases, it also talks about tribes in those two countries. So the tribes in East Congo and the tribes in Brazilian Amazon. So this means, number 9, tribal people in developed and industrialized nations are most affected. Let's just double check this. So see if we can find industrialized nations here. Okay, so the reason I was flicking through that quickly is I'm just trying to find, here it is. So industrialized nations, right? So despite growth in forest cover and stronger forest governance structures, industrialized nations forests and forest communities also feel the bite of growing demand for natural resources. So, okay, according to this writer, they're not considering Brazil. This writer is not considering Brazil to be completely industrialized. It's still developing to an extent. So that makes the answer false, right? Because it's tribal people so if we think about Congo, Congo is not developed, it's developing, and it's not fully industrialized. So that means the answer is false, right? So if we go back, I'll show you again. This is definitely one of the harder ones. Congo, the tribal people in Congo are affected by deforestation due to mining. And then it confirms the answer in J, that although people in industrialized nations also feel the effects of deforestation, they're not tribal people, right? So hopefully you can understand that the answer there is false, because we're not told anything about tribal people in industrialized countries, but we do know that tribal people in Congo are affected. I'll bring the question back up, are affected by deforestation. Okay, this is our last true, false, not given question. Just make sure I've got no questions from you. Okay, governments and non-government organizations will provide land rights to all Indigenous people in the future. Okay. Now, there's a couple of things you might want to look for here. I think land rights, if you can spot that as a whole phrase, well done. But I think the word land and the word rights probably going to appear quite commonly in any reading. Why don't we look for Indigenous, right? So, or else you might want to focus on government and non-government organizations. So we're going to go right back to the top. So why don't we scan for government and non-government organizations? So nothing in A, nothing in B about government and non-government organizations. Again, all I'm doing is I'm scanning for government and non-government organizations, right? So perhaps they might use the word state as a synonym for governments, but I can't see anything there in C. In D and E, we know those are the paragraphs about Gungi and Sukra Buyan, so there's nothing there about the government. Nothing in F about governments. But when we go down to G, we can see the word government. So government bodies like FUNAI or non-government movements like Survival International are faced with a daunting task. To have the rights of such indigenous tribes fully protected in the case of the Amazon and Peru, they first might have to prove the existence of these tribes. Now, it doesn't say that they will provide land rights to all indigenous people in the future, right? So that's where you have to just double check with the comprehension. So government bodies like FUNAI or non-governmental movements like Survival International are faced with a daunting task. To have the rights of such indigenous tribes fully protected in the cases of the Amazon and Peru, they might have to first prove the existence of these tribes. Right, so that doesn't have the same meaning as the question. So we can see the word rights and land rights. But again, there's nothing about land rights for indigenous people in the future, right? So again, as we scan down, the answer here is not given because that exact information that's presented in the question is not in the reading, right? So not given for question 10. Now we're on to the last three questions, and these are multiple choice questions. Now, I think if it's possible, when you do multiple choice questions, try to make a question out of the information that you're given, right? So the writer refers to specific indigenous peoples, the writer refers to specific indigenous people by name too. Now, so this means if we made that part into a question, the question would be, how does the writer refer to specific indigenous people by name, right? So how does or why does the writer refer to specific indigenous people by name? again, you're still going to be scanning, so we're still going to be looking for the word Indigenous. Now, just do it methodically. So we go right back up to the top. Now, here is the name of, where's an Indigenous group of people? Okay, so don't be confused, because Funai is not the name of the Indigenous people. That's the government's Indian Affairs Department, right? So again, what we're doing is we're looking for the name of specific Indigenous people. So we go down to B, we don't see the names of any people. But perhaps you could argue here that Busy, even though that's the name of a town, perhaps that's the name of the Indigenous people. So let's see if we can work out what the answer is. So the writer refers to specific Indigenous people by name to demonstrate the negative effects of deforestation. Maybe. To create a personal connection between the reader and the Indigenous people who are affected by the deforestation. To me, that seems like a very likely answer. To show the family life of Indigenous people, or to show, it shows the impact of global demand for raw materials. Now, to me, this question is definitely one of the more difficult ones. In any reading section, you tend to have some easier ones and some harder ones. This test is designed to give a range of scores. If everybody got band 9, then the test would not be valid. This is definitely a harder question. And to me, the best answer here is B, right? So why does the writer refer to specific Indigenous people by name? That means he gives you the name of the people. For example, the name of the place they live, Busy. And I'm assuming that Busy is the name of the Indigenous people. Now, I think it's to create a personal connection between the reader and the Indigenous people who are affected by deforestation. And by this point, when I get to question 11, I'm more familiar with this reading. So the purpose of this article is to expose the struggle that a lot of Indigenous people have due to deforestation. So the writer's trying to make this more personal to connect the reader. Okay, question 12. Governments in developing countries find it difficult to protect Indigenous communities that live in forests because. So again, this is going to be a why question. So sometimes it's easier to not overload yourself with all of the options, right? So we have 4 choices. Instead of looking at the 4 choices, just make a question in your mind. So why do governments, so because is why do governments in developing countries find it difficult to protect Indigenous communities that live in forests, right? So again, let's look for Indigenous. And we're also going to look for governments. So actually, we know from experience that governments were sort of down in the middle of the reading. So let's skip straight ahead to governments. Okay, so government bodies like Funai and non-governmental movements like Survival International are faced with a daunting task. And it tells us to have the rights of such Indigenous tribes fully protected, right? So again, protect. In the case of the Amazon and Peru, they might first have to prove the existence of these tribes. So to me, that is the answer. So why do governments in developing countries find it difficult to protect Indigenous communities that live in forests? Why? Because they might first have to prove the existence of these tribes. So they have to find them, right? So then what we do is we know the answer, then we match it to one of the options, and we can see the option here is clearly D. Okay, and we're on to the last question. Thanks for hanging in there with me. Which answer is not mentioned as a possible solution? Now, to me, these are more difficult ones, but we have no idea from, perhaps the only thing I can think of is solution, but sometimes you just have to read the options, so that's what makes it harder. So humans interacting with other species in a harmonious way, replanting trees that have been cut down, being aware that all living things have a claim on forests. People in urban areas also have to respect forests and clean water, as clean water and air depend on them. Okay, so now I would be probably looking for urban areas perhaps. That might be easy to find. So why don't we start from the bottom up this time, because we're less familiar with the bottom, so perhaps that answer might be here. Now, as I look in paragraph L, I see the word harmonious, right? So to me, harmonious is not a frequently used word, so this must be, we must be looking in the right place. Why don't we read paragraph L? So, and here it tells us solution as well, right? So which answer is not mentioned as a possible solution? So here it talks about solutions. Okay, perhaps the solution lies in recognizing the fact that we are only one species among many, and our well-being depends on harmonious interaction with others. Right, so there's A. So A is mentioned. Okay, all living things, including us, have a rightful claim on the forests of the world. Right, so there is C, that all living things have a claim on forests. Even if we live in urban areas on the other side of the planet, because the quality of the air we breathe and the water we drink and the climate we live in depend on them. So there is the final solution. So solutions A, C, and D are mentioned. Process of elimination, the answer must be B. And at this point, I get nervous because I'm going to check my answers and hopefully they're all correct. So what we do is we go to next and we can go to finish. We're just going to do section 1 today. Click on finish. Yay, 13, correct. So when you are practicing on the grade site, you don't have to finish all the sections at once. The sections that you have finished will be stored for you. So yeah, that's it. We've practiced section 1. I'd like to tell you about what's coming up ahead. So I'm going to switch back to the class whiteboard. Okay, where are we? Okay, I'm just going to clear what I've got here. Okay, so today we have looked at another academic reading section. Hopefully that was helpful for you. But I'd like to tell you that on Thursday, which is May the 28th, there will be a webinar for grade subscribers, right? And this one here is going to be speaking. So same time, all the webinars are at the same time, 1:30 Indian Standard Time. For grade subscribers, I'm going to cover speaking this Thursday. This is the first one I've done for speaking, and I'm going to attempt to answer some questions from the grade site and maybe some other ones which people might volunteer myself. And we'll just talk about some strategies for the speaking test. Just going to change. Okay, so maybe that font should be big enough. On Sunday, which is May the 31st, there'll be a replay. And funnily enough, this replay will be reading, right? So it's going to be a webinar which I made about a month or so ago. This was the first reading webinar that I did, and we looked at an article about tea, the history of tea, right? So if you watch the replay, there'll still be someone who can take your questions live. So it's a good chance to ask any questions to review that one. Next Tuesday for the public webinar, which is June the 2nd. This is going to be reading GT means general training, right? I'll just make this Tuesday, abbreviate it so you can see. Right, so next Tuesday, June the 2nd, into a new month next week, it's going to be general training reading test, right? So the differences with the IELTS test between general training and academic, the speaking tests are the same, the listening tests are the same, but when we get into the reading, general training, you'll have section 3 will be similar to the one we did today. So you're going to get a lengthy article and it will be on a random topic. But for the general training tests, sections 1 and 2 are much shorter and they're more everyday content. It could be a menu, could be information about a university or an education center, something that you're likely to encounter in everyday life. So next Tuesday, we're going to concentrate on a section from the general training test. So it's another practice test from the grade site. So for grade subscribers, again, I look forward to seeing you on Thursday. We're going to do some speaking together. Otherwise, have a great week. Do check the replay on Sunday. All of these webinars, always at the same time, 1:30 Indian Standard Time, which here in New Zealand is 8 p.m. Take care and stay safe.